The gavel didn't bang. It slammed. But even that sharp, authoritative crack couldn't drown out the voice of the man standing at the plaintiff's table. "She is a disgrace," he yelled, his face turning a shade of purple I hadn't seen since I was 16 years old. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "She manipulated my wife. She stole my house. She thinks because she plays dress-up in that uniform that she's better than us. But she's nothing. She's just a cold-hearted, ungrateful child." I sat at the defense table, my hands folded perfectly on top of the mahogany surface. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I stared straight ahead, focusing on the seal of the state of California hanging above the judge's bench. My father, Frank, was putting on the performance of a lifetime. Beside him, my brother Brad, 40 years old and wearing a suit that looked like it had been slept in, was nodding vigorously, wiping away a non-existent tear. "I want justice," my father bellowed. I took a slow, deep breath. Justice. That was a funny word coming from him. To understand why I was sitting there, calm as the eye of a hurricane, while my own father tried to destroy me in a court of law, you have to go back to the day the silence finally broke. You have to go back to the funeral. It was a Tuesday in November. The sky over San Diego was a bruised purple, heavy with rain that refused to fall. I stood by the gravesite, the damp grass sinking slightly under my heels. I was wearing my service dress blue uniform. It wasn't a costume. It wasn't playing dress-up. It was 18 years of blood, sweat, and sacrifices they knew nothing about. The cemetery was quiet, save for the priest's droning voice. Mom was gone. Lucia. The only person in that house who had ever looked at me and seen a human being, not a utility. I looked across the open grave. My father stood there, leaning heavily on Brad. Brad looked bored. Actually bored. He was checking his watch, probably wondering how soon he could get back to his investments, which was code for online gambling and crypto schemes that never paid out. I had paid for the casket. I had paid for the plot. I had paid for the flowers, the hearse, and the reception that would follow. The receipt for $14,000 was currently sitting in the digital banking app on my phone. When the service ended, people began to disperse. I walked over to the coffin to place a single white rose on top. I reached out, my white glove stark against the polished wood. "Don't touch her." The voice was low, guttural. I froze. Frank stepped forward, blocking my path. He smelled of stale tobacco and that unique, sour scent of old anger. "Dad," I said softly. "I just want to say goodbye." "You said goodbye years ago when you left," he spat. He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on the gold stripes on my sleeve with undisguised contempt. "Look at you. Showing up here in that costume. Trying to make this about you. Always the center of attention, aren't you, Olivia?" "It's my uniform, Dad. I came straight from deployment." "Deployment," Brad snickered from behind him. "Sitting behind a desk pushing papers isn't deployment, Liv. You act like you're G.I. Jane. It's embarrassing." My chest tightened. It was the old dynamic. The two-headed monster of my childhood. Frank the bully, and Brad the hyena who laughed at his jokes. "I didn't come here to fight," I said, keeping my voice steady. A skill I had learned in rooms much more terrifying than this one. "I came to bury Mom." "You came to look down on us," Frank sneered. He took a step closer, invading my personal space. "Your mother died broken-hearted because of you. You know that. She needed you here. But you were too busy with your career. Too busy being important." That was a lie. I knew it was a lie. I had been the one on FaceTime with her every night for the last 6 months while she was in hospice. I was the one who wired the money for the private nurse because Frank refused to spend his retirement savings, which I suspected didn't exist. I paid for her care, Dad, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper so the neighbors wouldn't hear. I paid for this funeral. Frank's face twisted. He leaned in close, right next to my ear. Money is all you have, Olivia. You think you can buy forgiveness? You think writing a check makes you a daughter? You're an ATM. That's all you are. And now that she's gone, you're useless to me. Then, he did something that froze the blood in my veins. He looked at the ribbons on my chest, medals earned for service in conflict zones, for legal brilliance, for serving my country, and he gathered saliva in his mouth. He spat. A glob of spit landed on my left lapel, right next to my ribbons. The world went silent. The wind stopped. The birds stopped. I looked down at the spit sliding down the dark fabric. Then I looked up at him. He was smirking. Brad was covering his mouth to hide a laugh. In that moment, something inside me didn't break. It solidified. It turned into steel. I didn't wipe it off. Not yet. I just looked at him. You're right, Frank, I said. I didn't call him Dad. I'm not your daughter anymore. I turned on my heel and walked away. I walked past the stunned priest. I walked past the neighbors who were pretending not to look. I walked to my rental car, got in, and only then did I take a tissue and wipe the saliva from my uniform. I didn't cry. Tears were for people who still had hope. I had no hope for them left. I only had a plan. They thought I was just Olivia, the quiet girl who sent checks and never complained. They thought I was a paper pusher. They had absolutely no idea. As I drove away from the cemetery, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank. Another withdrawal attempt from the joint account I had shared with Mom for her medical expenses. Brad was trying to pull out $5,000. I declined the transaction. Then I froze the account. The war had started. And they had fired the first shot at a funeral. 3 days after the funeral, we gathered in the stuffy, wood-paneled office of Mr. Henderson, the family attorney. He was a kind, elderly man who had known our family since I was a child. He looked uncomfortable. I sat in a leather chair by the window. Frank and Brad sat together on the sofa opposite me. They were already celebrating. Before we entered, I heard Brad talking about a new Ford Raptor truck he was planning to put a down payment on. It's about time we get what's ours, Frank had muttered. They assumed, naturally, that Mom's assets would go to Frank. That was the natural order of things in their world. The patriarch takes all. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. Lucia insisted on updating her will 6 months ago, he began, his eyes darting nervously toward Frank. She was very specific. She underwent a competency test to ensure the validity of this document. Cut to the chase, Henderson, Frank grunted, crossing his arms. I want to get out of here. I have a headache. Very well. Mr. Henderson opened the folder. To my husband, Frank, I leave my life insurance policy, totaling $50,000, to assist with his daily living expenses. Frank frowned. 50. That's it. The policy was for $200,000. She borrowed against it to pay for Brad's legal fees 3 years ago, Frank, Mr. Henderson said quietly. Don't you remember? Frank turned red but stayed silent. Brad shifted uncomfortably. Continue, Frank snapped. To my son, Bradley, Henderson read, I leave my vintage jewelry collection, and the sum of $5,000. I hope he uses it wisely. Jewelry? Brad's voice cracked. What am I supposed to do with jewelry? I'm a man. Where's the cash? Where's the savings account? And finally, Henderson took a deep breath, looking directly at me. To my daughter, Olivia. The one who has carried the weight of this family on her shoulders without asking for thanks. I leave the family home at 42 Maple Drive, along with the entirety of my residual estate, including her personal savings account. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It lasted for exactly 3 seconds. Then, the room exploded. "What?" Frank roared, leaping to his feet. "That house is mine. I paid for it. I built this family." "Actually, sir," Henderson interrupted, his voice firm. "The title was in Lucia's name. It was inherited from her parents. And the mortgage, well, the records show the mortgage has been paid by Olivia for the last 10 years. Frank spun around to face me. His eyes were bulging. You witch. You poisoned her against me. You made her do this." I remained seated. "I didn't make her do anything, Frank. Mom knew you would sell the house within a month and gamble the money away on Brad's schemes. She wanted to make sure you had a roof over your head. As long as I own it, you can't sell it. I am the man of this house," he screamed, slamming his fist on Henderson's desk. "I don't need your charity. That house is worth $800,000. That is my equity." "It's not equity, Dad. It's a home," I said calmly. Brad stood up now, pointing a finger at me. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Miss High and Mighty Officer. You manipulated a dying woman. That's elder abuse. We can sue you for that." "We will sue," Frank declared. He was breathing hard, his face a mask of pure hatred. "I'm going to contest this will. I'm going to drag you into court, Olivia. I'm going to expose you for the snake you are. I'll make sure the Navy knows what kind of person they have working for them. I'll ruin your clearance. I'll ruin your career." That was the trigger. He threatened my career. My service. The one thing that was purely mine. I stood up slowly. I was taller than Frank now. Years of posture training and physical conditioning gave me a presence he lacked. "You can try, Frank," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was cold enough to freeze water. "But you should know one thing. If you sue me, you aren't suing your daughter. You are suing a commander in the United States Navy Judge Advocate General's Corps. I don't lose in court." "Get out," Frank screamed. "You're dead to me. I have no daughter." "You made that clear at the funeral," I said. I looked at Mr. Henderson. "Thank you, Arthur. I'll be in touch regarding the title transfer." I walked out of the office, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. My hands were shaking, but I shoved them deep into my pockets so no one would see. I knew this wasn't over. Frank was a man driven by ego and entitlement. He wouldn't let this go. He would find a lawyer, some bottom feeder who would smell a payout, and he would come for me. I got into my car and sat there for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. The sadness was receding, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. They wanted a fight. Fine. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. "Commander Reyes," a crisp voice answered. "It's me," I said. "I'm going to need to extend my leave. And I need you to run a background check on a name." "Who is the target, ma'am?" "My brother," I said. "Bradley Reyes. And find out who my father is using for legal counsel." I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the investigator. And the investigation had just begun. The summons arrived 2 weeks later. I was staying at a temporary apartment downtown. I couldn't bring myself to go to the family house yet, knowing Frank and Brad were still squatting there, stewing in their rage. A process server knocked on my door at 7 a.m. He looked apologetic. "Olivia Reyes?" "Yes. You've been served." I took the thick envelope. I didn't open it immediately. I made coffee. I put on a playlist of classical music, Vivaldi, Winter. Only then did I sit at the kitchen island and slice open the seal. Frank Reyes vs. Olivia Reyes. Complaint for damages, undue influence, elder abuse, fraud. He had actually done it. He had accused his own daughter of abusing her dying mother. The nausea hit me in a wave, but I pushed it down. I flipped to the last page to see the signature of the attorney representing him. My blood ran cold. Richard Sterling, ESQ Sterling and Associates. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound that echoed in the empty apartment. Of course. It had to be him. 5 years ago, when I was working a joint task force operation regarding defense contractor fraud, Richard Sterling's name had come up. He was a civil litigator known for creative accounting and helping clients hide assets. We suspected he was laundering money for a corrupt subcontractor. I had built a case against him, but at the last minute, a key witness disappeared, and the evidence chain was broken. Sterling walked away. He never knew my face. I was operating as an analyst in the background back then, but I knew his. He was a shark. A man with zero morals who would burn a family to the ground for 30% of the settlement. Frank hadn't just hired a lawyer, he had hired a hitman in a suit. This changed everything. This wasn't just a family squabble anymore. If Sterling dug into my finances, he might find the classified accounts connected to my work. If he threw mud at my name in public court, even if it wasn't true, it could trigger an automatic review of my security clearance. Frank was trying to nuke my life. I stood up and walked to the mirror in the hallway. I looked at myself. Tired eyes. No makeup. A woman grieving. Enough, I said aloud. I went to the closet and pulled out my working uniform, khakis. I didn't put it on, but I hung it on the outside of the door. I needed the reminder. I wasn't just Olivia the daughter. I was Commander Reyes. I had prosecuted war criminals. I had negotiated treaties in hostile zones. I was not going to let a failed mailman and a failed gambler take me down. This was the snap. That moment where the emotional tether breaks and you become pure logic. I turned my living room into a war room. I bought a whiteboard. I taped the summons to the center. On the left, Frank and Brad. On the right, the assets. In the middle, the lie. I needed to prove 2 things. Mom was competent when she signed the will. I had not exerted undue influence. But to destroy Sterling, I needed more. I needed to prove that they were the ones abusing her. I started with the finances. I pulled up my own bank records, 10 years of mortgage payments, property tax records, insurance bills. I printed them all. Stack A, the provider. Then I started digging into Brad. I logged into a database that civilians aren't supposed to have access to. It's amazing what you can find when you know where to look in public records that aren't indexed on Google. Bradley Reyes. Credit score, 420. Judgments, 3 evictions in the last 5 years. Liens, a pending lawsuit from a credit card company. But then I saw something that made me stop. A connection. Brad had a secured loan taken out 2 years ago. High interest. Predatory. The lender was an LLC called Granite Holdings. I ran Granite Holdings. It was a shell company. I dug deeper, peeling back the layers of corporate obfuscation. Registered agent, generic mail drop in Delaware. Manager. Richard Sterling. My breath hitched. Sterling wasn't just a random lawyer Frank found in the phone book. Sterling was Brad's loan shark. The picture became crystal clear. Brad had borrowed money from Sterling's shadow company, probably for gambling or a sure-thing investment. He lost it. He couldn't pay. Sterling was squeezing him. So Brad convinced Frank to sue me for the house. If they won the house, they would sell it, and Sterling would get his payout directly from the sale. They were using my mother's death to pay off my brother's gambling debt. I stared at the whiteboard. The anger was gone. In its place was a burning, righteous fury. I picked up a red marker and circled Sterling's name. "You picked the wrong family to extort, Richard," I whispered. I needed hard evidence. I needed a link between Brad and Sterling that would hold up in court. And I needed to know exactly what happened in that house during the months I was deployed. I needed eyes inside 42 Maple Drive. I grabbed my keys. I was going to National City. I was going to visit the one person who saw everything but whom Frank never paid attention to. The neighbors. And specifically, Martha, the retired schoolteacher who lived next door and spent her days gardening right under my parents' kitchen window. It was time to gather the receipts. National City isn't a wealthy area, but it has character. The houses are old, the lawns are sometimes overgrown, but the people there know everything. I parked my rental car 2 blocks away from my parents' house, my house, legally, to avoid being seen by Frank or Brad. I walked to Martha's house. Martha was 72, with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She was pruning her roses when I walked up. "Olivia?" She dropped her shears. "Oh, honey. I heard about the funeral. I saw your father yelling. Can I come in, Martha?" Inside, over tea that tasted like cinnamon and secrets, Martha spilled everything. "It was terrible, Olivia," she whispered. "The shouting. Day and night. Once your mother got sick, Frank stopped hiding it. He would yell at her for needing water. He would yell at her for the cost of the medicine. Did you ever see Brad? See him? He moved in 3 months ago. Said he was there to help. But all I saw him do was bring home fancy electronics and take out food. And the friends he brought over, shady characters. Men in expensive suits who looked out of place. Men in suits." I leaned forward. "Did you ever see a man with silver hair? Walks with a slight limp. Always wears a 3-piece suit." Martha frowned, thinking. "Yes. Twice. He came when Frank was out at the VFW hall. He only talked to Brad. They argued on the porch once. The man was poking Brad in the chest." "Sterling," I said. It was confirmation. Sterling was pressuring Brad before Mom even died. "Martha, would you be willing to testify to that?" She hesitated. "I don't want trouble with Frank. You know how he is." "I know. But this isn't about Frank. It's about Mom. It's about Lucia." Martha looked at a photo of my mother on her mantelpiece. "For Lucia," she said softly. "Yes. I'll do it." I left Martha's with a witness statement, but I needed something stronger. Hearsay and neighbor testimony were good, but documents were king. I went to the county recorder's office next. I pulled the title history of the house. There it was. A notice of pendency of action filed 3 days ago by Sterling. They were trying to freeze the asset. But I looked further back. I found a document filed 2 years ago. A quitclaim deed, attempting to transfer the house from Lucia Reyes to Bradley Reyes. It was rejected by the clerk because the notary stamp was smudged and the signature didn't match the record on file. I requested a copy. I stared at the signature, Lucia Reyes. It was shaky. It looked nothing like my mother's elegant script. But it looked exactly like the way Brad signed his name, heavy loops, jagged lines. He had tried to steal the house 2 years ago. He forged her signature. I took a picture of the document with my phone. Forgery. That was a felony. I sat on a bench outside the courthouse, organizing the file. Motive: Brad owes Sterling money, via the shell company link I found. Opportunity: Brad lived in the house while Mom was dying, and I was deployed. Pattern: attempted forgery 2 years prior. The deal: sue for the house to pay the debt. But I still lacked the smoking gun, regarding Mom's mental state. Frank's whole case rested on the idea that Mom was mentally incompetent when she signed the new will leaving the house to me. They would have paid doctors to say she was confused. I needed to prove she was sharp as a tack until the end. I checked my phone. I had a missed call from an unknown number. I listened to the voicemail. Commander Reyes. This is Nurse Jenkins. I was the night nurse for your mother. I heard about the lawsuit. Your brother called me. He asked me to sign an affidavit saying your mother was on heavy narcotics and didn't know what she was doing. He offered me money. My grip on the phone tightened. Witness tampering. I didn't sign it, the voice continued, trembling. But I have something for you. Your mother, she asked me to record something for her. On the nights when she couldn't sleep. She said, in case Olivia needs it. Can you meet me? My heart hammered against my ribs. In case Olivia needs it. Mom knew. Even on her deathbed, she was protecting me. She was still being the mother I couldn't be there to hold. Yes, I texted back immediately. Name the place. I looked at the courthouse looming above me. It was a fortress of rules and laws. Frank and Sterling thought they could use those laws as a weapon. They thought they could bury me in paperwork and lies. But they forgot one thing. I was a jag. I didn't just read the law. I weaponized it. I stood up, adjusting my blazer. The sadness was entirely gone now. I was in full operational mode. I was going to meet Nurse Jenkins. And then, I was going to set a trap. I met Nurse Jenkins at a diner off the I-5. It was a neutral ground, noisy enough to mask conversation but quiet enough to hear the truth. She looked younger than I expected, maybe late 20s, with tired circles under her eyes that spoke of double shifts. She was clutching her purse like a lifeline. Commander Reyes, she asked as I slid into the booth opposite her. Please, call me Olivia. You took care of my mother. She nodded, tears instantly welling up in her eyes. She was a wonderful woman, Olivia. Even when the pain was bad, she never complained. She just talked about you. She was so proud of your service. The lump in my throat returned, but I swallowed it down. You said on the phone that my brother offered you money. Jenkins looked around nervously. Yes. He called me 3 times. He said if I testified that Lucia was hallucinating from the morphine on the day she signed the will, there would be $5,000 in cash for me. He said it was what Lucia would have wanted to keep the family together. That is a lie, I said firmly. I know. Because Lucia told me exactly what was happening. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, silver USB drive. She slid it across the sticky table. What is this? About a week before she passed, your father and brother had a huge fight in the living room. They were shouting about money. Lucia was terrified. She asked me to help her sit up. She asked for her makeup. She wanted to look dignified. Then she asked me to record her. I held the cool metal of the USB drive in my hand. It felt heavy, heavier than its physical weight. I haven't watched it, Jenkins said. She made me promise to give it to only you. She said if they come for Olivia, give her the truth. I reached out and covered her hand with mine. Thank you. You have no idea what this means. Are you willing to testify to this? To the bribe attempt? She took a deep breath. I'm scared of them. Your father, he has a temper. But Lucia held my hand when my own mom died last year. I owe her this. Yes. I'll testify. I drove back to my apartment with the USB drive in my pocket. It felt like I was carrying a grenade. When I got home, I plugged it into my laptop. The screen flickered and then there she was. Mom. She looked frail, her skin paper thin, sitting up in the hospital bed set up in the living room. But her eyes, they were clear. Sharp. Intelligent. Olivia, she said, her voice raspy but steady. If you are watching this, it means Frank has done what I feared. It means he is trying to take the house. She paused to cough a painful, wet sound. I am of sound mind, Mija. I know what day it is. It is October 12th. I know who the president is. And I know that my husband and son view me as a checkbook, not a person. She looked directly into the camera lens, and it felt like she was looking into my soul. I am leaving the house to you, Olivia, not because I love you more, though God knows you are the only one who has loved me back without conditions, but because I need you to be the shield. Frank will squander it. Brad will gamble it. You will protect our legacy. Do not let them bully you. Do not let them say I was crazy. I am choosing this. I am choosing you. Then, the video cut to a different angle. It was shaky, clearly filmed by the nurse hiding her phone. It showed Frank standing over the bed. Sign the damn papers, Lucia. Frank was yelling in the video. Just sign the transfer to Brad. Why are you being so difficult? No, Mom's voice came from the bed. It's Olivia's. I already signed the will. You stupid woman. Frank raised his hand as if to strike her, then stopped when he saw the nurse enter the frame. The video ended. I sat in the dark, the light of the laptop screen illuminating the tears finally streaming down my face. This was it. The receipts. The smoking gun. Not only did it prove Mom was competent, but it also captured Frank attempting to coerce her and threatening her. It was evidence of elder abuse. I copied the file to 3 different secure cloud servers. I encrypted it. Then, I looked at the whiteboard again. I had the financial fraud. I had the witness to the bribery. I had the video of Mom's intent. But I wasn't done. I wanted to destroy Sterling. I wanted to make sure he never practiced law again, so he couldn't hurt another family. I picked up my phone. I needed to set the trap. I called Sterling's office. This is Olivia Reyes, I said, making my voice sound small, shaky, defeated. I want to talk about a settlement. I can't do this anymore. Please, can I come in to see Mr. Sterling? The receptionist sounded smug. One moment, Ms. Reyes. Sterling came on the line a moment later. Olivia. I'm glad you're seeing reason. I just want it to stop, I whimpered. I don't want to go to court. Can we meet tomorrow? Of course, Sterling purred. Come to my office. We can work out a transfer of the deed. I hung up. My expression shifted instantly from feigned fear to cold determination. I was going into the lion's den. And I was wearing a wire. The next morning, I dressed in civilian clothes, a simple gray sweater and slacks. I wore no makeup. I wanted to look tired. I wanted to look like a grieving daughter who had been broken by the pressure. Underneath the sweater, taped to my chest, was a high-fidelity digital recorder. In my purse, my phone was set to transmit live audio to a secure server. Sterling's office was in a glass high-rise in downtown San Diego. It screamed expensive. Leather sofas, modern art, a view of the bay. It was all bought with money stolen from people like my mother. Richard Sterling didn't recognize me. He saw a tired woman, not the intelligence analyst who had nearly caught him 5 years ago. Olivia, he said, not standing up to shake my hand. He gestured to a chair. Please, sit. Thank you, I said, keeping my voice low. I have the papers drawn up right here, Sterling said, sliding a thick document across the desk. It's a quitclaim deed. You sign the house over to Frank Reyes. In exchange, Frank agrees to drop the lawsuit for undue influence. We won't pursue legal fees. It's a very generous offer. I picked up the pen, my hand trembling intentionally. But the house is mine. Mom left it to me. Sterling sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. Olivia, look at the reality. We have witnesses who say your mother was out of her mind on drugs. We have medical experts ready to testify. If this goes to trial, not only will you lose the house, but the public record will show that you, a Navy officer, abused a dying woman. Think about your clearance. Think about your reputation. There it was. Extortion. Are you saying? I paused, looking up at him with wide eyes. Are you saying you'll ruin my career if I don't give you the house? Sterling smiled, a cold, shark-like grin. I'm saying that litigation is ugly, Olivia. Things come out. Sometimes, damaging things. Even things that aren't strictly true can leave a stain. Why risk it? Frank just wants what is his. And Brad? I asked. Does he get a cut? Sterling's eyes narrowed slightly. Brad is a devoted son. This is about family justice. It feels like you're threatening me, Mr. Sterling. He leaned forward, dropping the pretense. I'm telling you how the world works, little girl. You might play soldier, but in this arena, I am the general. You have no money. You have no support. Sign the papers or I will bury you under so much legal paperwork you'll be paying me until you're 80. And the loan. I dropped the bomb softly. The loan Brad owes to Granite Holdings. Sterling froze. His left eye twitched. I don't know what you're talking about. Granite Holdings, I repeated, my voice strengthening slightly. The company you own. The company Brad owes $200,000 to. If I sign the house over, you sell it, take your cut for the debt, and Frank gets the scraps. Isn't that the plan? Sterling stood up. His face went from smug to menacing. You've been digging. That's dangerous. Is it true? It doesn't matter if it's true, Sterling hissed. It matters what I can prove. And I control the narrative. Now sign the damn paper, or I will make sure every commanding officer in the Pacific Fleet hears that Olivia Reyes is a thief. I put the pen down. I need time, I said, reverting to the shaky voice. I need to think. Sterling laughed. You have 24 hours. After that, we file the motion to freeze your bank accounts. I walked out of the office. My knees were shaking, not from fear but from adrenaline. He had admitted to the threat. He had implicitly acknowledged the Granite Holdings connection. He had threatened a federal officer's career to obtain a financial asset. I got into my car and stopped the recording. Gotcha, I whispered. But Sterling had one more card to play. I knew he did. He mentioned damaging things. He was going to fabricate evidence. I drove home and prepared for court. I pressed my dress uniform. I polished my shoes until they shone like mirrors. I pinned my ribbons on, the Meritorious Service Medal, the Navy Commendation Medal, the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal. I wasn't going into that courtroom as a defendant. I was going in as a prosecutor. I called Mr. Henderson, the family attorney who was technically representing me, though I was doing all the work. Arthur, I said. Tomorrow, I want you to let them talk. Let Frank lie. Let Sterling posture. Do not object. Let them dig the hole as deep as possible. Olivia, are you sure? That's risky. I'm sure. Because when they are done, I'm going to drop the sky on them. The San Diego Superior Court, Department 4. The room smelled of floor wax and old misery. I sat at the defense table, spine rigid, hands clasped. I wore my full-service dress blues. The gold stripes on my sleeves caught the fluorescent light. Frank and Brad sat with Sterling. They were smiling. They looked at me with pity mixed with disdain. Frank was wearing a suit I had bought him for his 60th birthday. The bailiff announced, "All rise." The Honorable Judge Evelyn Vance presiding. Judge Vance walked in. She was a woman in her 60s, with steel-gray hair and a face that brokered no nonsense. I knew her reputation. She was fair, but she hated wasted time. She sat down and looked over her glasses at the courtroom. Her eyes lingered on my uniform for a fraction of a second, then moved to Sterling. "Calling the case of Reyes versus Reyes," she said. Opening statements. Sterling stood up. He buttoned his jacket, oozing confidence. He walked to the jury box, though there was no jury today, it was a bench trial, and began his performance. "Your Honor," Sterling began, his voice dripping with faux sadness. "This is a tragic case. A case of a daughter who used her military authority to intimidate a dying woman. A daughter who, absent for years, swooped in at the last moment to cut out the father and brother who had been by Lucia Reyes's side every day." He pointed at me. "Olivia Reyes paints herself as a hero. But beneath that uniform is a manipulator. We will show that Lucia Reyes was heavily medicated, confused, and coerced into signing a will she did not understand." I sat stone-faced. Inside, I was seething, but I channeled that heat into focus. Frank took the stand first. "Mr. Reyes," Sterling asked, "describe your relationship with your wife." Frank sniffled. He actually pulled out a handkerchief. "We were happy. We were partners for 40 years. Until she came back." He pointed at me. "Olivia started whispering in Lucia's ear. Telling her I was no good. Telling her Brad was a loser. She made Lucia afraid of us. And the house. I paid for that house." Frank lied effortlessly. "I worked double shifts at the post office. It was our retirement. Olivia stole it." Judge Vance looked at me. Cross-examination. Mr. Henderson stood up. "No questions at this time, Your Honor." Frank looked surprised. He expected a fight. When none came, he looked triumphant. He thought he had won. Next came Brad. "Mom was scared of Olivia," Brad testified, avoiding eye contact with me. "Olivia acts like she's a cop or something. She ordered Mom around. Mom just wanted peace, so she signed whatever Olivia put in front of her." "Did your mother ever express a desire to leave the house to you?" Sterling asked. "All the time," Brad said. "She said, 'Brad, you're the son. You should have the house.' I wrote on my legal pad, 'perjury.'" Sterling was building a narrative of the poor, victimized men against the cold, military tyrant. It was a good story. If I didn't have the truth, it might have worked. Then, Sterling did the unexpected. "Your Honor," Sterling said, "we have one final piece of evidence. A character assessment based on Commander Reyes's military conduct." I stiffened. "Military conduct. Personnel files are confidential." Sterling pulled out a folder. It was marked confidential in red stamps. It looked like a standard Department of Defense personnel jacket. "We have obtained records," Sterling announced, waving the folder, "that suggest Commander Reyes has a history of insubordination and financial irregularity within the Navy. It speaks to a pattern of behavior." The room went silent. Judge Vance leaned forward. "Mr. Sterling, those look like official military records. How did you obtain them?" "We have our sources, Your Honor. They are relevant to the defendant's character." I looked at the folder. I knew my record. It was spotless. Whatever was in that folder was either forged or illegally obtained. If it was forged, he was committing fraud on the court. If it was real, and he somehow got it, he had violated the Privacy Act of 1974, and likely several federal statutes regarding the handling of military records by civilians. This was the trap I hadn't even had to set. He walked right into it out of arrogance. I leaned over to Mr. Henderson. Let him enter it. Olivia, if that's real. Trust me. Let him enter it into evidence. Sterling handed the folder to the bailiff. Defense Exhibit A. Judge Vance took the folder. She opened it. She read a few pages. Her eyebrows went up. Mr. Sterling, the judge said, her voice dropping an octave. You are aware that accessing a service member's personnel file without a court order or their consent is a federal crime. It's public interest, Your Honor, Sterling stammered slightly. And it proves she is unfit. I stood up. Your Honor, I said. My voice rang clear and authoritative, filling the room. May I approach the bench? Judge Vance looked at me. She looked at the uniform. She looked at the JAG insignia on my collar, the mill wheel and the anchor. You may, Commander. I walked to the bench. Sterling followed, looking annoyed. Your Honor, I said, keeping my voice low but audible to the court reporter. The document counsel just submitted purports to be my officer service record. If it is authentic, Mr. Sterling has just confessed to a felony violation of the Privacy Act. If it is a forgery, he has committed fraud upon the court. Either way, I would like to call a sidebar regarding the source of this document. Sterling turned pale. It's just a copy. A copy of a classified fitness report. I pointed to the red stamp on the page the judge was holding. That document contains operational details of my last deployment. Mr. Sterling, do you have a security clearance? I know, Sterling said. Sweat appeared on his forehead. Then you are in possession of classified material, I said coldly. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, I move to dismiss the plaintiff's case on the grounds of gross misconduct, and I request a recess to contact the Department of the Navy regarding a security breach. Frank stood up at the back. What is she saying? Why is she talking? Sit down, sir. Judge Vance barked. She turned her gaze to Sterling. It was a look that could melt steel. Mr. Sterling, the judge said. You have exactly 5 seconds to tell me where you got this folder before I have the bailiff take you into custody. The room was electric. The air was sucked out of the space. Frank's face went from confusion to fear. Brad looked like he was about to vomit. And me? I just stood there, watching the dominoes start to fall. Sterling was sweating profusely now. The confident shark had become a trapped rat. Your Honor, he stammered, my private investigator, he obtained it. I was assured it was legal. You are an officer of the court, Mr. Sterling, Judge Vance said, her voice dripping with disdain. Ignorance is not a defense. You just handed me a document labeled confidential government property. Do you know what the penalty is for trafficking in stolen military records? I withdraw the exhibit, Sterling said quickly, reaching for the folder. No, I said, my hand shooting out to block his. Once entered, it's evidence. And now, it's evidence of a crime. I turned to the gallery. I looked straight at Frank. Dad, I said. Did you know your lawyer was breaking federal law to attack me? I didn't know, Frank stuttered, standing up. He said he had dirt on you. He said you were corrupt. Sit down, Mr. Reyes, the bailiff stepped toward Frank. Judge Vance slammed her gavel. We are going on the record. Mr. Sterling, you are in serious trouble. But before I address your misconduct, I want to hear the defense's case. Commander Reyes, you claimed you have evidence to refute the plaintiff's claims. I do, Your Honor, I said. And I don't need stolen documents to prove it. I walked back to the defense table. I picked up the USB drive Nurse Jenkins had given me. Your Honor, the plaintiff claims my mother was incompetent and coerced. I would like to play a video recording made by Lucia Reyes 3 days before her death. Authenticated by her attending nurse, who is present in the courtroom today?" I pointed to the back of the room. Nurse Jenkins stood up, trembling but brave. Sterling tried to object. "Objection. Surprise evidence." "Overruled," Judge Vance snapped. "Given your little stunt with the personnel file, I'm inclined to give the defense a lot of latitude. Play the video." The bailiff connected my laptop to the courtroom monitors. Suddenly, Mom's face filled the screens. The sound of her raspy breathing filled the silent courtroom. Frank went white. He slumped back in his chair. "I am leaving the house to you, Olivia. Frank will squander it. Brad will gamble it." The video played on. The part where Frank yelled at her. The part where he threatened her. "Sign the damn papers, Lucia. You stupid woman." Gasps rippled through the small audience in the courtroom. I looked at Frank. He had his head in his hands. He couldn't look at the screen. He couldn't look at the wife he had bullied into her grave. The video ended. "That is my mother's voice," I said to the judge. "That is her will. Uncooked. Clear." And heartbreakingly aware of the men sitting at that table. I wasn't done. "And regarding the motive for this lawsuit," I continued, picking up a stack of papers, my stacka from the war room. "I have here bank records showing that Bradley Reyes has accumulated $200,000 in debt to Granite Holdings." I walked over to Sterling's table and dropped the paper in front of him. "I also have the corporate registration for Granite Holdings. The manager is Richard Sterling." Sterling froze. He looked like a statue. "This lawsuit isn't about a will," I announced to the room. "It is a conspiracy between a predatory lender," I pointed at Sterling, "and a debtor," I pointed at Brad, "to defraud this court and seize an asset from a deceased woman's estate to pay off an illegal gambling debt." Brad jumped up. "That's a lie. You hacked my accounts." "Sit down." Judge Vance roared. She looked at Sterling. The look was terrifying. "Mr. Sterling," Judge Vance said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Is this true? Do you hold the debt of the plaintiff's son?" Sterling didn't answer. He couldn't. If he said yes, he was disbarred for conflict of interest. If he said no, he was perjuring himself against the documents I just submitted. "Silence speaks volumes," Judge Vance said. She turned to Frank. "Mr. Reyes, did you know your son owed your lawyer $200,000? Did you know they were using you to get the house so they could pay off that debt?" Frank looked up. He looked at Brad. "What? Brad? You said this was about respect. You said we were going to invest the money." "He lied to you, Frank," I said softly. "Just like he lied about the job. Just like he lied about the car. They were going to sell Mom's house, take the money, and leave you with nothing." Frank looked at Brad. For the first time, I saw the realization dawn on him. The golden child was a fraud. The daughter he despised was the only one telling the truth. "You," Frank whispered to Brad. "You gambled it. You gambled your mother's house." "Dad, no, she's twisting it," Brad cried, sweat streaming down his face. Judge Vance cleared her throat. "I have heard enough," she said. She stood up, towering over the bench. "I am ready to render a judgment. And frankly, Mr. Sterling, you might want to call your lawyer. Because you aren't leaving this building freely." I stood tall. My uniform felt lighter. The weight was lifting. The trap had sprung. And they were all caught inside. The silence in the courtroom following my revelation about Granite Holdings was heavy, suffocating, and absolutely delicious. It was the sound of a house of cards collapsing. I watched my father, Frank. For my entire life, this man had walked with his chest puffed out, convinced he was the king of his castle. He believed that because he was the man, the world owed him respect. He believed Brad, his son, was the prince who would inherit the kingdom. And I was just the help. I was the invisible infrastructure that kept their delusion running. But now the infrastructure was speaking. "Mr. Sterling," Judge Vance said, her voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. "I am going to ask you one more time. Do you have a financial interest in the outcome of this case through a debt owed by Bradley Reyes?" Sterling stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. The sweat was now visible on his upper lip. If he admitted it, he was disbarred. If he lied and I proved it, which I clearly could, he was going to prison for perjury. I assert my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination," Sterling whispered. A gasp went through the gallery. In a civil trial, pleading the Fifth is essentially an admission of guilt. "Noted," Judge Vance said, writing furiously on her pad. "And the court draws a negative inference from that refusal." She turned her gaze to Frank. He looked smaller now. The bluster was gone. He looked like exactly what he was, an old man who had been played for a fool. "Mr. Reyes," the judge said gently but with steel underneath. "It appears your legal counsel and your son have been less than honest with you." Frank stood up slowly. He looked at Brad. You owe him $200,000. From what?" "The crypto business." Brad was shaking, tears streaming down his face, not tears of remorse, but tears of a child caught stealing from the cookie jar. "Dad, it was a sure thing. I was going to double the money. I was going to buy you a boat. I did it for us." "You did it for you," I said from the defense table. My voice was calm but it carried. "Just like you forged Mom's signature on that quitclaim deed 2 years ago. Just like you tried to bribe Nurse Jenkins." "I didn't." Brad screamed. "I have the forensic handwriting analysis, Brad," I said, lifting another file from my stack. "And I have the bank records." I turned to the judge. "Your Honor, with your permission, I would like to address the issue of the house itself. My father claims he paid for it. He claims he is the provider. I think it is time to correct the record." "Proceed, Commander," Judge Vance said. I walked to the projector. I placed a series of documents on the glass. "This," I pointed to the screen, "is Frank Reyes's pension statement. It is barely enough to cover groceries and utilities. It has been that way for 15 years. I swapped the document. And this is the mortgage statement for 42 Maple Drive. As you can see, the monthly payments were 3 times my father's disposable income." Frank squinted at the screen. "Lucia paid it," he muttered. "She managed the money." "Mom didn't work, Dad," I said softly. "She had no income. She had savings. From her parents. Her parents died with debt, Frank. You know that." "Then how?" Frank looked around, confused. "The house was paid off. We had a party when we burned the mortgage note 10 years ago." I placed the final document on the screen. It was a wire transfer record. Dated 10 years ago. Amount, $145,000. Sender, Lieutenant Olivia Reyes, USN. Recipient, San Diego Federal Mortgage Trust. Memo, payoff, 42 Maple Drive. The room went dead silent. Frank stared at the screen. He read the name. He read the amount. He read the rank I held back then. "I paid off the house, Dad," I said. "I used my signing bonus and every cent I saved from my first 3 deployments. I lived in base housing, eating ramen and driving a 10-year-old car, so I could send that money home. Mom asked me to keep it a secret. She said it would hurt your pride if you knew your daughter was the one keeping a roof over your head." Frank slumped back into his chair, as if he had been punched in the gut. "No," he whispered. "That's not. I'm the man of the house." "You haven't been the man of the house for a decade," I said, allowing the anger to finally bleed into my voice. I was. I paid the mortgage. I paid for the new roof in 2018. I paid for Mom's cancer treatments. I paid for the funeral you stood at and insulted me. I turned to Brad. And you knew, I said. You saw the bank statements when you were snooping around the house. You knew I paid for everything, but you still convinced Dad that I was a thief. You let him believe he was a king while you robbed him blind. Brad looked down at the table, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Frank, I said, using his first name again. It felt powerful. You called me an ATM. You were right. But you forgot that an ATM has a security camera. And it keeps records. I looked at the judge. Your Honor, the defense rests. We have proven that the plaintiff's case is built on lies, forgery, and a criminal conspiracy to defraud an estate. The house belongs to me because my mother left it to me, and frankly, because I bought it 10 years ago. The air in the courtroom felt electric. The shift was palpable. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the daughter on trial. I was the owner. I was the authority. Frank looked at me, and for the first time in his life, he didn't see a disappointment. He saw the person who had been carrying him. And the weight of that realization was crushing him. But I wasn't done. Sterling was still sitting there, plotting his escape. He thought he could just plead the fifth and walk away. Judge Vance was organizing her papers. She looked furious. She looked like a woman who was about to bring the hammer down. I sat back down. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. I looked at the jag pin on my lapel. Service. Justice. I had served my family. Now I was getting justice. Judge Vance didn't even call for a recess. She didn't need one. She stacked the files, the fake personnel records Sterling had tried to submit, the affidavit from Nurse Jenkins, and my financial records, into a neat pile in the center of her bench. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Then she put them back on and looked directly at Richard Sterling. Mr. Sterling, she began, her voice deceptively calm. In my 20 years on the bench, I have seen incompetence. I have seen greed. I have even seen malice. But rarely have I seen such a breathtaking combination of all three. Sterling tried to stand. Your Honor, if I may, you may not. Her voice cracked like a whip. Sit down. Sterling collapsed back into his chair. You brought a frivolous lawsuit before this court, Judge Vance continued. You attempted to defraud a grieving family. You partnered with a predatory lender, yourself, to seize an asset. And most egregiously, you attempted to introduce a classified military document that you obtained illegally. She turned to the bailiff. Deputy, please secure the courtroom doors. No one leaves. Then, she looked at Frank. Mr. Reyes. You stood up in my courtroom and called your daughter a disgrace. You mocked her service. You claimed she was nothing. Frank was trembling. He looked like a ghost. Sir, Judge Vance said, leaning forward, her eyes blazing. You really have no idea, do you? Frank blinked, confused. I don't understand. Your daughter, Judge Vance pointed a gavel at me. Commander Olivia Reyes is not just a lawyer. She is a senior investigator for the JAG Corps. Do you know what that means? Frank shook his head dumbly. It means she prosecutes people who do exactly what your lawyer just did. She protects the men and women who serve this country. While you were sitting at home living off her money and insulting her, she was building cases against war criminals and corrupt contractors. The judge paused for effect. The silence was absolute. She owns this courtroom, sir. Not literally but in spirit. Because she represents the very best of the law. And you represent the very worst of entitlement. Frank looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of shock and shame. He looked at the uniform again, but this time, he didn't see a costume. He saw the armor I had built around myself. "Commander Reyes," Judge Vance said to me. "The court finds in favor of the defense on all counts. The will of Lucia Reyes is upheld as valid. The property at 42 Maple Drive belongs solely to you." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said. "Furthermore," she continued, turning back to Sterling, "I am referring this matter to the State Bar for immediate disbarment proceedings. And regarding the classified document." She gestured to the back of the room. The doors opened. 2 men in dark suits walked in. Behind them was a man in a Navy uniform with 2 stars on his shoulder. Rear Admiral Harrison. My boss. The entire courtroom froze. Even the bailiff stood straighter. Admiral Harrison walked past the bar, his footsteps heavy and precise. He stopped at the defense table and nodded to me. "Commander," he said. "Admiral," I replied, standing at attention. He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, thank you for alerting my office regarding the security breach." "The pleasure is mine, Admiral," Judge Vance smiled. "Mr. Sterling is all yours." Sterling's face went gray. "Wait. I didn't know. I was just..." The 2 men in suits, NCIS agents, stepped forward. One of them pulled out handcuffs. "Richard Sterling," the agent said. "You are under arrest for violation of the Privacy Act, possession of stolen government property, and conspiracy to commit fraud." They hauled him up. Sterling looked at Brad. "You idiot. You said she was just a paper pusher. You said she was nobody." Brad was sobbing into his hands. "I didn't know. I didn't know." As they dragged Sterling out of the courtroom, passing my father, Frank looked up. He looked at the handcuffs. He looked at the Admiral. He looked at me. "Olivia," he whispered. His voice was broken. You know the Admiral." "The Admiral is here because I asked him to be, Frank," I said coldly. "Because unlike you, he respects loyalty." Judge Vance banged her gavel one last time. "Court is adjourned. Commander Reyes, thank you for your service. And for your patience. All rise," the bailiff called out. I gathered my files. I didn't rush. I moved with the precision of a woman who had planned every second of this victory. My father was still sitting there, staring at the empty space where his lawyer had been. Brad was being questioned by a deputy regarding the forgery charges that were inevitably coming next. I walked past them. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The feeling in my chest wasn't just relief. It was vindication. It was the feeling of a 1,000-pound weight being lifted off my shoulders. I had proven them wrong. I had saved Mom's legacy. And I had done it without lowering myself to their level. I walked out into the hallway, the marble floors echoing my footsteps. The Admiral was waiting. "Good work, Commander," he said. "Take some time. Sort out the house." "Aye, sir," I said. He left and I was alone in the hallway. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes for a second. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 20 years. It was over. The war was over. The adrenaline of the courtroom began to fade, replaced by a deep, hollow exhaustion. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright San Diego sunshine. It felt jarring. Inside, lives had just been destroyed. Outside, people were buying coffee and walking their dogs. I was heading to my car when I heard footsteps hurrying behind me. "Olivia." "Livy, wait." I stopped. I didn't turn around immediately. I knew that voice. It was the voice that used to read me bedtime stories before the bitterness took over. It was the voice that had screamed at me at the funeral. I turned slowly. Frank was jogging toward me, out of breath. He looked old. Suddenly, incredibly old. The suit I bought him hung loosely on his frame. "Livy," he panted, stopping a few feet away. He reached out a hand, then dropped it when he saw the look on my face. "It's Commander Reyes," I said. He flinched. "Right. Commander. Look. I didn't know. About the house. About the mortgage. About Brad stealing. You didn't know because you didn't want to know," I said. "You wanted Brad to be the hero so badly that you let him rob you blind. You wanted me to be the villain so badly that you ignored 10 years of evidence." "I was proud," he stammered. A man is supposed to provide. When I couldn't, I got angry. And you were doing so well. It made me feel small. So you tried to make me smaller," I finished for him. "You tried to destroy my career to make yourself feel big." "I was wrong," he said. Tears were welling in his eyes now. Real tears. "I'm sorry, Mija. I'm so sorry. Can we start over? Brad is going to jail, probably. I have nowhere to go." "The house." He looked at me with hope. He expected the old Olivia. The Olivia who craved his approval. The Olivia who would write a check just to see him smile. He expected me to say, "It's okay, Dad. You can stay. I'll take care of you." I looked at him, and I felt a wave of sadness. Not for him, but for the little girl inside me who had waited 30 years for this apology. But the apology was too late. It was bought with currency he didn't have. He was only apologizing because he had lost. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you," I said. "What is it?" "It's a letter from Mom. She wrote it the same day she made the video. She told me to give it to you only if you lost the house." Frank took the envelope with shaking hands. He tore it open. I watched his eyes scan the page. I knew what it said. Mom had read it to me. "My dearest Frank, if you are reading this, it means you tried to take the house from Olivia. It means you chose your pride over our daughter. I loved you, Frank, but I enabled you. I let you treat her like a servant because I was afraid of your temper. But I am not afraid anymore. Olivia is the best of us. She is the strong one. If you have lost the house, do not blame her. Blame yourself. And learn, finally, to stand on your own 2 feet. Goodbye, my love." Frank crumpled the letter to his chest and began to sob. He sank down onto a bench near the sidewalk. She knew he wept. She knew I would do it. "She knew you better than you know yourself," I said. "Olivia," he looked up, his face wet and red. "Please. I have no money." Sterling took the retainer. Brad lost the savings. I'm homeless. This was the moment. The final test. "You have your pension, Frank," I said. "It's small, but it's yours. There are senior apartments in Chula Vista. I can give you the number of a caseworker." You're kicking me out?" "I'm selling the house, Frank." "But where will I go?" "You'll figure it out," I said. "Just like I had to figure it out when I was 18, and you told me the Navy was a mistake. Just like I had to figure it out when I was deployed and lonely. You are a grown man. You are the man of the house, remember? You can't do this to your father," he pleaded. "I'm not doing anything to you," I said, stepping back. "I'm just stopping doing everything for you. There is a difference." I turned around. "Goodbye, Frank." "Oliva," he called out. I kept walking. I got into my car. I locked the door. I watched him in the rearview mirror, sitting on the bench, clutching the letter, a small figure in a large, indifferent world. It hurt. I won't lie to you. It felt like cutting off a limb. But it was a gangrenous limb. If I hadn't cut it off, it would have killed me. I drove to the house, my house. Brad was gone, presumably picked up by the police or hiding. The house was a mess. Pizza boxes, beer cans, gambling slips everywhere. I walked into Mom's room. It was the only clean room in the house. It still smelled like her lavender perfume. I sat on her bed and touched the quilt she had stitched by hand. "I did it, Mom," I whispered. I stopped them. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah, my friend in IT who had helped with the files. "Just heard about Sterling. It's all over the news. Prominent attorney arrested in Jag sting. You're a legend, Liv." I smiled weakly. I didn't feel like a legend. I just felt free. I packed up Mom's jewelry, the few pieces Brad hadn't stolen yet, and her photo albums. I took the quilt. I called a junk removal service. "I need a house cleared out," I told them. "Everything goes. Except the structure." "When do you need us there?" "Tomorrow morning. I'm putting it on the market on Monday." I hung up. I wasn't going to live here. Too many ghosts. I would sell it. I would take the money I had invested, the money Mom had saved, and I would do something good with it. Something that would make Frank's greed meaningless. I walked out of the house and locked the door for the last time. I left the key under the mat for the cleaners. I got back in my car and drove toward the ocean. I needed to breathe. Sunset Cliffs is one of the most beautiful places on Earth. The sandstone cliffs drop sharply into the Pacific Ocean, and the waves crash against the rocks with a rhythm that feels like the heartbeat of the world. I stood at the edge, the wind whipping my hair across my face. I was wearing civilian clothes, jeans and a sweater. No uniform. No armor. Just me. I held a small urn in my hands. It wasn't all of Mom. Frank had insisted on a burial plot, but I had kept a small portion of her ashes. She had always told me she wanted to travel, to see the ocean, to be free of that house. "You're free now, Mama," I whispered into the wind. I opened the urn and poured the ash into the air. The gray dust caught the breeze and swirled out over the churning white foam of the water. It disappeared into the vast, blue expanse. I stood there for a long time, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. I thought about Frank. I heard later that he had moved into a small studio apartment. He was working part-time as a security guard to make ends meet. We didn't talk. Sometimes, silence is the only healthy relationship you can have with certain people. I thought about Brad. He was currently serving 3 years for fraud and forgery. He sent me a letter once, asking for commissary money. I returned it unopened. I thought about the house. It sold in a week. The market was hot. After paying off the closing costs, I had a check for nearly $900,000. It was a life-changing amount of money. Frank would have bought a boat. Brad would have gambled it on red. I did neither. I established the Lucia Reyes Scholarship for Women in Service. It provides full tuition and legal mentorship for enlisted women who want to become JAG officers. It helps women who, like me, came from nothing and wanted to protect others. Every year, I read the applications. I read stories of women who are providers, who are overlooked, who are strong. And every year, I pick 5 of them and tell them, "We see you. We got your back." Sterling was disbarred and is currently serving a 5-year sentence in federal prison. It turns out, my case opened the floodgates. Once people knew he was vulnerable, dozens of other victims came forward. He lost everything. His firm, his reputation, his freedom. Karma isn't always instant, but when it hits hard. I took a deep breath of the salty air. For years, I defined myself by what I provided for others. I was the daughter who paid the bills. The sister who fixed the messes. The officer who followed orders. But standing there on the cliff, I realized I was more than that. I was the woman who stood up. I touched the small gold anchor pendant I wore around my neck, a gift I had bought for myself with the first check from my new life. I turned away from the ocean and walked back toward my car. My phone buzzed. It was an email from one of my scholarship recipients. "Commander Reyes, thank you. You changed my life." I smiled. Frank was wrong. I wasn't just an ATM. I wasn't a disgrace. I was Olivia. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. The sun was gone now, but the sky was still glowing. It was going to be a beautiful tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to my story. I want to know if you made it to the very end. If you are one of the true supporters, please comment the letter A below. It tells me you listened to the whole journey, from the funeral to the cliffs. And if you have a story about standing up to family, or finding your own peace, please share it. I read every single comment. You are not alone. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Until next time, take care of yourselves. You deserve it.